And just calling this meeting to order. And we're going to go ahead and take a roll to see who is with us. And so I will go ahead and call out names. Give me just a second. Okay, or you can slide it that way. Molly could too. All right, Vice Chair Moss, or Chair Moss, sorry.
Here.
Vice Chair Hart. Here. Vice Chair Earl is here. Board Member Bogus. Yes. Board Member Booth.
Yes.
Board Member Klein. Board Member Davis. Here. Board Member Green.
Here.
Board Member Hymas.
Here.
Board Member Carey.
Here.
Board Member Lear.
Here.
Board Member Norton.
Here.
Board Member Rill. Board Member Straight.
Here.
Board Member Wood. Okay, and we are missing just Board Member Klein. Is that accurate? Okay, no, not online. Okay, so we just have two online right now. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's a little after. I got to find my glasses so I can see. Yeah, 12:04. Okay, so we're right on time with our schedule. We're going to try to stick pretty close to the schedule that we have outlined today. Anyways, we'll try to stick close to that. If we need to extend some times here and there, we'll be open to that. Okay, so this is an action item. It's 2024 legislative session funding priorities, and I will turn the time over to Scott Jones, Deputy Superintendent of Operations. It looks like, do we have Sam and Dell as well? Or sorry. Okay, so School Finance Director and also MSP Administrator. Those are the two individuals that are working with us here. Okay, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Okay, my funding whisperer joke didn't go over very well in House Ad today, so. All right, so budget priorities, item number 2. What we tried to do since our last meeting is to clean up some of the question or clean up the presentations to answer your questions about where money's going, the reallocations, those types of things. So given the amount of time that we have for 20 minutes, we'd like to first start out with the related to basic program. So you can see precisely what they did or what's been done so far. The session isn't over. What's been done so far, where the money's going. So if we could call on Director Yuri, Madam Chair.
Yes, that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay, if we can pull up the.
Well,
On number 2.
Yes, that would be right.
did I say the wrong agenda? Okay. Yes, we're on 2, right? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Sam Yuri, School Finance Director here at USBE. So if you recall, there were 9 related to basic programs in the minimum school program that were not included in the base budget. Those 9 are here, and we've kind of delineated them into separate categories according to what happened. And so the first 5 there: at-risk, gang prevention, effective teachers in high poverty schools, elementary school counselor program, Title I schools paraeducator program, and the early literacy program were all eliminated and used to fund 1 increment increase on the at-risk WPU add-on. Of note is that the effective teachers in high poverty schools program is coming back 1 time for fiscal 25, but otherwise these programs are recommended to be eliminated by the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee.
Okay. I think,
yeah.
Do you have a question?
Question.
Wasn't competency-based education on here at one point?
So these are just the 9 related to basic school programs. I think competency is in, we can review that as well.
That's in a different group? Okay.
Right. Yep. Other questions? We'll proceed. So the 2 programs that remain unchanged, recommended by PEA, are dual immersion and digital teaching and learning. And then 2 other programs that will somewhat stick around: the pupil transportation rural school reimbursement, that is just one district and one charter school is now a USBE line item. So it's not in the minimum school program anymore, but the funding is still recommended to stay. The rural school district transportation grants, that $1 million ongoing has been recommended to be moved into the new NES formula. So any questions on those 9 programs?
I'm not seeing any.
So Madam Chair, at your direction, we could go to the next backup document in or behind this particular agenda item. So we wanted to make sure that the board had access to, or we do have access to it, but the ability to review what the recommendations were from the Public Education Appropriations Committee to the Executive Appropriations Committee. That meeting took place this past Monday. There's a shorter list, which you're looking at now. And we can, in the interest of time, we can just kind of scroll down through this and make sure that you're seeing what the PEA recommended to the EAC as the priorities. We also have prepared a crosswalk, or we have the crosswalk, but I didn't see it in the backups. Is it up high?
Reviewed it last.
Oh, we reviewed it last time.
week,
Okay.
but-
And we'll make sure that that's kept up to date too. But it's current as of what we know from EAC on Monday, or what PEA chairs recommended to EAC on Monday. You can see the reallocations here too. We know they're not as descriptive as Sam just gave you on the related to basic. We'll make sure though that that's updated as well, going into your next meeting, so you can see where all the money's going. The session isn't over yet, so there could be changes. I still don't know if revenue has come out yet, or an update on revenue. We anticipated it would be either today or tomorrow. So as soon as we get that, then we'll correlate that information in our next meeting with all the different movements that are going on with appropriations. So I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions or concerns. We realize these are coming in not 4 or 5 days before. So our expectation is not that you had gone through all these within the last 24 hours, given all the other things coming up. But we would encourage you, or through you, Madam Chair, that the board members do take time to review these and come back to us with questions. If they'll address the questions to me by email, they can, call, text, we'll capture those, because likely what individual board members' questions are, more than one board member has the same question. So we really want to make sure, but by the time we get to next Thursday, you've had a chance to go through these and really tell us or ask us what your questions are related to this. So subject to any questions or concerns about this smaller item for review, we could go to the next one at your direction, Madam Chair.
I'm not seeing any hands. So if you want to go ahead, that would be
Okay.
fine.
If we could open that one up. Is this the big document, 53 pages? Yes, okay. So please don't let the fact that this is 53 pages long intimidate you in any way. What this does is it provides more background or more description on the funding items. So if we could just maybe go down to, what page are you on? Go to page 28. So here you can see that this one, or this page, has what the priorities were from PEA to EAC, right? Yeah, PEA to EAC. So on all these pages, you can see more description of the different programs. So Madam Chair, back to Vice Chair Hart's question, this is where you'd really want to look for your particular programs of interest. I know they're all of interest to you, but if there's any particular one that you've seen, this is really the really good document that could stimulate your questions, further questions on where we're headed as far as where we're at right now and where we will be next Thursday with the process that is the legislative session and is about appropriations. This goes into excellence in education and leadership, WPU value increase, in addition to the inflationary increase. Slide down a little bit. The effects of the statutory increase on the local levy guarantee. Yeah, just one more page maybe. Rural student WPU add-on. Here's the BTS that you're all interested in. There's prime expansions, and maybe there's a program that you're just not familiar with and you see it for the first time here. We would like to offer the opportunity to help better understand that program, the background behind it, current and future funding levels with it. Next, just do one more page. Here's the SOEP subsidy. And this, wait, actually pause right there. So this funding provides statewide online education program courses to SOEP learners enrolled in schools with fewer than 1,000 students. So here, lots of questions about, well, what's the 3.1 million specifically for? It's this document that probably has the most value to you and the public to look at item by item, appropriation by appropriation, or recommendation by recommendation of PEA to EAC at this point. So Madam Chair, we'll pause there if there's any questions about this. But again, just encouraging board members to use this as for future iterations of our meetings and, deeper dives into any of the questions or concerns they have about the program. So we feel this is really the document everyone should be looking at this point.
And I do have a question.
Sure.
There's a number of bills out there with fiscal notes. Those maybe, if they're new, would they be included in this document?
So if a new bill opens up, likely no. If it wasn't put in here as part of the recommendations, then do. If the bill coincides with what PEA recommended, then yes, but I won't say that a new bill that opens up and we're asked for a new fiscal note would show up in here. We would subsequently update all those with what the legislature updates, if that makes sense. Does that help answer your question, Madam Chair?
Yes, it does. And when we get to the end of your, whatever you're presenting today, if we don't have other questions, I do have one maybe just procedural question as we get
Sure.
towards the end of the legislature, anyways, yeah, so.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to propose?
If we can go to page 33,
Yeah.
just to follow up, we had a question on the small and rural school district capital needs fund. And the LFA did clarify that it is intended that that will be 100% loans at this time. So.
Member Vargas, do you have a question?
Yeah, I would like to see the BTS stuff again, if possible.
think that
I
was
tried to
just
find it in my own
29.
document and I didn't.
Sure.
Page 29, item 4.
So is this additional ongoing funding?
So,
Do I understand that correctly?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Board Member Bogus does understand that correctly. This would be $3 million of new money with the condition that the new money be only used to place more teachers in schools. It cannot be used for salary adjustments. Does that help answer Board Member Bogus's question?
Member Vargas, does
Yes.
that?
Yeah, thank
is
you
that
for
what you're
that.
looking for?
I
Okay.
appreciate that. Oh, I can't show.
Go ahead.
So did you cover 33, page 33? Okay. So ma'am, pending any other additional questions, that concludes our update or briefing. Again, it is an action item, but it doesn't mean we're asking for any action. We just put that on there in case you do see something or want to take action. We're not asking for any action at this time.
Okay, and I think board member,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Member Davis, do you have a question?
Just a quick follow-up. Did they end up giving us the extra year to work on the BTS salary formulas and such, or did they just take it out to the straight?
No, they did not. To this point, there's nothing in that we are aware of in any of the legislation that does that.
So it's just going to be a flat, they're not going to reimburse for salaries anymore. It's going to be a flat.
So the distribution would be based on an average salary to each of the LEAs that have those number of teachers
Is
in them.
unfortunate. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, can I ask, I have just, are you addressing this?
Add something if I could.
Sure. Yes, go ahead.
Just wanted you to know, Board Member Davis,
Do you want to
that-
identify,
Oh.
sorry, yourself?
Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy at the State Board of Education. And I'm actually just supplementing what Deputy Jones was just talking about, the Beverly Taylor Sorensen. The only thing I wanted to add is that there is still a possibility that in the final budget bill or another budget bill, likely, there could be an amendment to provide that year extension. Conversations are still going on fervently, and we are meeting with different people to kind of share some options, as well as you may have seen Chair Moss did send an email to PEA, and I believe it's also been forwarded to some members of Executive Approps. So just wanted you to know there is a possibility, but there's nothing right now that we see in a bill that would change it from what it is right now, which means this would start this upcoming school year.
Okay, I do have just a question. Can you just help us understand the process as we get down to the last week when we have, I know they'll keep funding requests right on the third calendar circled or sitting there.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious how that process weaves with the funding that's already here, right? I mean, I do understand that a little bit, but I also want to understand there's a lot of funding requests that are little pieces here and there. How do they go about reconciling that last week?
Sure. So just from a financial process standpoint, Madam Chair, so we know at this point, as of this date time group, PA has made, well, the subcommittees are making recommendations or have made recommendations to EAC. So they take those recommendations. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say that, you know, an updated revenue will take a big part of this. So when we get that, we can, you know, share that with the board too at your next meeting. Really what it comes down to then is EAC meets with, well, the EAC chairs and the different, you know, in the Senate and the House meet together, and they really see, okay, these are the recommendations from PEA. These are the recommendations from the other subcommittees. Then they reconcile those recommendations with also what's pending or what can happen over the next, you know, between now and the end of the session, which Deputy Stallings just pretty much articulated it pretty well, which, you know, things are still being discussed, things are being talked about. What we really look for is the draft of what I think will be SB2, right? Yeah, so it'd be SB2. And once we have that, we try to share that information with you as much as possible so that we can say, yeah, it looks like the Beverly Taylor Sorensen example, they have put something in there or they have not, or those types of things. That's kind of the aggregate process. But Deputy Superintendent Stallings is much better and much more skilled in knowing these processes than I am.
And I
So,
guess for me, I'm looking at the ones that are coming out in the last week,
yeah,
right? That now have a
right.
funding request, and I'm thinking, where does that go, right? And I guess someone at some point
Exactly.
prioritizes it and puts it into that bill, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I was just going to add, that's why when you look at the meeting materials for executive appropriations, likely later next week and early the week of the last week of session, that's where you're going to see motions and or lists that look very similar to what PEA produced, but it is now, these are the things that we have flagged are may be passed. And so you'll see bills pop in there that may not have been on the Public Ed Appropriations Subcommittee radar for different reasons. And so, yeah, just as Deputy Jones stated, really watching EAC and those motions that they make, the lists they produce, that will tell you a lot of the movement that's going to occur the last week of the session.
I agree.
Mhm.
So, and then just one question to add to that. So when that comes out, those bills that are sitting there may get passed, they may not, right? So
correct.
I'm just trying to understand that
Mhm.
engagement there. If the bill is sitting there and it ends up not getting passed, what happens?
Then oftentimes they'll reallocate those funds to another bill.
Okay,
So like
okay.
they're tabled on third or second, if it's it depends on if they're in the House or the
Right.
Senate. And they're tabled due to fiscal impact. Then once it appears on a list from executive probes, then you'll notice that motions will be made to move those bills from tabled on third to the third reading calendar or tabled on second to the second reading calendar. And to your point, that doesn't always mean that 100% they're going to pass. And if they don't, then oftentimes the money that was kind of reserved may be reallocated, or they just will they'll just save the money for next year.
Okay, I thank you for humoring me. I've been up here a few years, but I'm still trying to get those details out. And like I said, I keep seeing more bills come out that have a fiscal impact, and I keep thinking, where does that sit in here where we've not had discussion about it? So, okay, well, I think that's it on this item, unless there's anything more. Okay, no, do we have any questions or anything? Okay, we're going to move to review of legislation. Oh, go ahead.
So what type of advocacy takes place? I mean, we moved in this board meeting to ask that our early literacy folks aren't, decimated. And they still are, according to this screen. So what kind of advocacy takes place when we ask staff to work between staff or leadership or whatnot on an issue? How does that happen? I mean, we asked for the speech text to be included in SB 52. We've asked a few different things. Can someone help us understand that?
Yeah, Superintendent Dixon, would you mind taking just a second?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is a great example. I'll just land on early literacy for a bit. So after a motion is made, we don't have an opportunity to sit formally in front of PEA or executive approach. So that's all done with meetings. So we have been advocating for those with members of leadership of EAC and PEA who continue to negotiate. So Deputy Jones and I set up a meeting with some key leaders. In fact, Deputy Stallings and I had a conversation just earlier today about our $450,000 for literacy specialists. So that's when you start having those one-on-one conversations. And I would encourage you all to do that as well. It doesn't just have to be staff. If you see leaders of EAC and PEA, remind them that we took made a motion in open board meeting. And this is why. So if you need talking points, just text any of us. We can give those to you. But that's where that happens, so that when probably what will be a week from tomorrow in EAC, they'll start to make some motions, as Deputy Stallings described. And that's where you might see that pop back in or into Senate Bill 2. So all those conversations, making it really clear. I think the two important points for early literacy, we have a Google Doc full of all of the things that our staff does that are required, most of it already required in statute, that are not necessarily aligned to the K-3 funds being rolled up. So there's still all of these requirements, which makes it then unfunded mandates. The second part that Deputy Stallings pointed out about the staff, you want to share because you articulate well when we were having our conversation earlier, beyond just the unfunded mandates.
Yes, and maybe there was a question about licensing staff. Is that the part?
Oh, that was the other thing. So we were also talking about so here's an example. We were talking about a fiscal note. You'll start to see bills come through where staff has done all of this work around, this is what it will cost us to carry out that piece of legislation. They will negotiate with us or talk to us about, I don't like that fiscal note. I don't like that it costs as much. And sometimes that results, as Sam knows, that we go back and we change, we say, all right, in order to get the fiscal note down, take this piece out of your bill or change it this way, and that will change the fiscal note. So there's some of that that's going on as well. An example of that today was talking about one that is a different pathway for licensure. Well, Deputy Stallings was explaining how there's always this transition to keep people grandfathered in. And there was this look of puzzlement until Deputy Stallings reminded this long-term representative, we don't charge licensing fees. So any of our staff in licensure, by statute, we are not allowed to charge fees. So you have to give us the money for people to do that work. So those are the kinds of conversations that we're having almost daily to remind our good legislative partners why we have to have funding in our office to do certain things. And that 450 in early literacy is a good example. Super long answer, but it's important that you all have that understanding. So if you have the opportunities, you can take advantage of those.
Thank you. Very quick follow-up, Chair.
Yes, quickly.
how do they pick what is on the chopping block? Because something's going on behind the scenes, because you don't just take a list of tons of programs and randomly pick out early literacy. What's happened? Because they're the ones who started the whole early literacy movement, wanted all of this to happen. And now they're saying they're not going to fund it. So what is happening behind the scenes, and why would they randomly pick this out of all of the things that we do to not fund?
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
I don't know that it was random. I think in our conversations, it seemed like there was some intentionality, thinking if they were rolling up the money into the at-risk funding, that would eliminate the need for staff at the state board. And there's an overall attitude. I'm trying to choose my words carefully. There's an overall attitude perhaps that we are deep at the board, meaning that we have plenty of people and that we could have fewer. And we always like to remind them that our neighboring states our size, have a lot more people than we do.
Mhm.
So there is that perception, I guess. And I think rolling that, when the conversations I've had, there's like this sudden awareness of, oh, we just thought if we rolled this up and sent it directly out to the LEAs, then there's no work for you to do, which is then our reflection back to, gosh, we have a list of like 20 things that we're still required to do
code.
in all these different parts of statute that are not in that K-3 line. And in order to do that work, we need this funding. We're finding people to be really receptive when we share that, but I don't think it was random. I just think it was this misunderstanding without checking in with us that if we roll this program up, you don't need the people.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on if there's no further questions. Oh, okay, just be quick. So we're in.
I will.
time-wise.
Thank you. And I know you want to move on.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to point out, and I'm expecting that you say this, but even if they pass on work to the LEAs, which I'm seeing more and more in this, I was looking at this new bill by Karen Peterson, HB 546, and it looks like the LEAs are doing the work, but I'm hoping that you're saying, I hope there are a number of people saying, but if you want data on what's happening, there's no one to collect that but the USBE. And that's a yeoman job sometimes. And I think that they are not aware that LEAs doing the work translates to USBE collecting information. So I just think that's an important.
Thank you. I do
addition.
think Angie Stallings does articulate that when she speaks to them. She
and
has
I-
a
yeah, maybe
depth
that's
of
too
knowledge.
simplistic,
So,
But thank
yeah.
you for letting me say it.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, we're going to go on to review of legislation. So
Well, good afternoon again. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy, and I'm going to be joined here at the table by Elise Newey, USBE Policy Advisor. And we have a list of bills that are in Civic Clerk backup. And of course, we are also happy to Chair Moss or Vice Chair Earl, whoever's, sorry, Madam Chair,
Yes.
apparently you're chairing today. If you would like to stop us at any moment so that we could just answer questions and go to bills that you would like. I did not receive any requests from board members to elevate bills to be prioritized. So we'll just go down the list and we'll try to keep it brief. If you want more detail, please stop us and we can provide more detail. So the first bill, HB 499, Education Reporting Amendments, is coming as a result of the recommendations from the Reports and Requirements Task Force. You may remember there's a policy request that would, it changes in number of sections of code from annual training requirements to a three-year cycle of training requirements. There were not as many, I think, as we were anticipating. Many of those that are going to need updates will be in our board rule coming soon. There were a couple that upon review didn't seem to be best to change from 1 to 3 years. So, but that HB 499 is related to our policy request that came from the Reports and Requirements Task Force. Next, HB 418.
Okay, this on.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's not.
I can't hear very well today. I have a little bit of a cold. HB 418 is Student Offender Reintegration Amendments, and this is coming from Representative Matthews. So right now, as of last year's legislation, there is a policy in place in which schools need to come together to create reintegration plans for students who have been in the juvenile justice system. This expands that to students who are also charged with sexually related crimes. And there is some questions as to what that would look like, especially for our smaller schools or our charter schools, where that reintegration, it explicitly forbids schools from putting the victim and the perpetrator together in the same school. But that creates some difficulty, I'm sure you can imagine, for our very small schools or our charter schools. And so that is one thing that we're tracking to figure out how we can best help our LEAs with that. So.
Should I keep going?
Sure.
All right, the next bill is HB.
Yes, Board Member Lair.
And I'm reading this quickly. None of us had a lot of time in the last couple of days. But I'm not seeing that there is a notification provision in this bill. Am I missing that? Like
So-
the somehow local law enforcement, the juvenile justice system notifies the LAA when a student that has had serious problems comes back to the school. Is that in this bill and I'm missing it?
That
or-
is not in this bill, but that is part of other pieces of code that went through actually last year, that they have to notify the superintendent. And this year, actually, a couple different bills expanded that. So it can also be the superintendent's designee
Okay.
is notified at several different points within the juvenile justice process.
Because when I was working with smaller LEAs, that was the biggest problem. They were not informed in advance when students were coming
There-
back into the.
So just to go along with that, there is an issue because this also says that when an elementary school or a middle school has an issue and then that student is then moved on to the high school, there needs to be documentation and communication of that data about that student. And that's not something that we regularly do as a policy. And so that's another question as to how that would look to notify that school later down the line.
Okay, I just hope that that is being, I hope that's taking place. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
The next bill I'm going to review is HB 301 and the title.
My apologies. There is one question. I don't mean to interrupt. Was this related to the last bill?
Yeah,
Okay, Board Member Bogus, go ahead.
thank you. I don't know how to frame this question, so it might not come off super well. Do I understand it correctly that we're establishing a pathway for verified sexual offenders to be present with other students inside the classroom?
Thinking through this question.
Is maybe the better way of, or not better, sorry.
No,
is-
that's fine. Like I said, I did not really have the words. I just want to understand what we're looking at here.
Is, because my understanding is this bill increases the number of issues or activities that could then require a reintegration plan. So certain things that right now people would not think rise to the level of,
So for example,
Yeah.
like lewdness is one of those that's included, which lewdness can include like mooning people, showing your backside. And so that would require through this a reintegration plan, whereas that is typically seen as something that the school deals with or juvenile justice deals with on their own. And it doesn't require the reintegration plan process, which brings in multiple people from the community to decide what is the best way for the student to come back. And it's usually, it was initially set up as a like violent crime. So those students that, you know, people needed to kind of be aware of and be on, you know, to have a plan in place. Right. And so this just opens that up a little bit more to these other offenses as well.
Okay, may I follow up?
Yeah, go ahead.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, there's already a reintegration plan for students with patterns of behavior
Yes.
that are sexual in nature, and we're putting them inside our schools. So would we have, and I'm asking, would we have a plan to, besides an MTSS team, to fundamentally prevent future issues inside our schools?
Go ahead. Patty.
Thank you. Patty Norman, Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement. Yeah, sorry, lose my loud voice. Okay. In addressing the question, let me just repeat it so that I'm clear on what you're asking. So you're asking whether or not those students who have been charged with a sexual offense are allowed back into schools.
Yes.
Yes, they are. So there's plans that are put in place, and according to what that reintegration plan is, it could include them completing intervention. It could include them having completed a sentence. It depends on what that is. So every child, just like an adult, would be able to be reintegrated back into society in some way. And those plans are followed according to what the agreement from the court is. And then when they've served that and they've done what it is to take to remediate or in their plan themselves, then there's a reintegration plan that's back into the school as well.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one question? Without the reintegration plan, I'm just trying to seek some clarity too. Could a student just be put back, if we didn't have the reintegration plan, a parent could just have the child put back into school, or is that not the case at all?
So
Depending on what the crime is?
Depending on what the crime is, as Elise was speaking to. So it depends on, right now, it would have to be a violent offense with this in there. Then now we're charging with lewdness, which does include things that were not violent in nature. So it would now include those things.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yep, one more question from Board
And
Member Lear.
just to be clear and fair, sometimes these are not crimes because they're juveniles. So they're offenses. And so there's a different level of proof and all of that kind of stuff. And my concern, having worked on both sides of this, is where would these students go otherwise? And many LEAs are very, very aware and very conscious that they can look for at-home placements, but then families don't want that often. So this is a real, a stickier thing than we don't want bad kids in schools.
Yes, go ahead.
This was also brought up at one of the CCJJ committees that I am on as well. And one of the data points that was brought up was the fact that the juveniles who commit sexual offenses have the lowest rate of recidivism of any crime or any action that they have. And so that was actually brought up with guns, knives, all of the things that happen in schools or outside of school. This has the lowest recidivism rate. And so I just wanted to share that with all of you.
Okay, thank you. All right. We can move on to the next one. I'm not sure who's next.
Thank you. That's me. HB 301, Charter School Accountability Amendments. This bill, sponsored by Representative Lisenby, makes changes to various provisions related in some ways to the USBE and authorizer overlap, I guess I would say. As I listen to Representative Lisenby and others speak to this bill in committee, they will mention the audit on charter school governance, and that part of the intent behind this bill is to clarify those roles. The first thing that the bill does, it does reduce the number of appointments that the state board has for the state charter school board from 2 to 1 member. It also very clearly or explicitly eliminates the monitoring role from authorizers, with the idea that monitoring of programs is clearly or is a USBE role. Also, it allows charter authorizers to set performance measures of sort. You'll see some places where it changes maybe management to outcomes, or a performance measure instead of, and I'm trying to remember what the other term was, but you could take a look at that as well. But I think the idea is that USBE is monitoring programs, funding, et cetera, whereas the charter authorizer would be working and holding their schools accountable to their agreements, their charter agreements, as well as working with their local board members, their local charter school governing board members on oversight and governance. So and that's essentially a quick overview of that bill. I don't know if you have any specific questions. HB 301.
You have a question?
Should we keep going?
Board Member Wood has a question, I think.
I do have a question. I saw somewhere on a funding list, a movement of rental from the is that associated with this
I
bill?
think it is in here. I believe this one does say that the state charter school board does not have to reside within our building. It might
They
be,
currently pay rent to us to be in there?
they
So-
do pay us some funding to be
Okay,
in
so,
there.
so it's just a,
I think it's the same. Yeah. Yeah. So just like, I don't know if you are familiar, but each employee at the State Board of Education, part of the amount for our person at USBE, it's not just salary and benefits, but also there's a portion that pays for like my office, my laptop. It's called the indirect cost pool. And so that same amount is also what is quote unquote charged for the employees of the state charter school board. But it's the same amount that you would pay for me that you might pay for for one of their employees.
follow up.
Yes, go ahead.
So is this going to cost the state more to allow them? Are we having to appropriate additional funding to have them this ability to move somewhere else?
Well, that's a good question. If they chose to move somewhere else, it would depend on how much. So let's say that they're 8 or 10. I'm not even sure how many staff they have. But let's say they did want to move. Currently, there's a certain amount they're paying through the ICP to have their space at USBE. I'm not sure what that amount is, but the question would be, would they be able to find comparable space at another? Because they not only get services of space, but they rely on, for example, Jerry and team for their streaming. They rely on our finance staff for purposes of processing payments, our travel staff to, help get those things. So there's a lot of services within USBE, not just facility space. So the question would be, would they be able to find the same support services if they were to move to another location, and or if they were to move to another location, would they still be using our, finance services, our IT services, streaming services, all of that. So it's not just that I don't know that there's any plan for them to move right now, but I think this opens up the possibility for them to do that in the future if they'd like.
Thank you.
Okay. Was there another question? Board Member Lair?
A few questions just to make sure I'm understanding. So there'd be fewer USBE appointments, and those would be, the governor would appoint more. Is that right? As I read it?
Yes, my recollection is I think the governor would point upon recommendation of a charter association is my recollection.
7 individuals. So that was one question. I just want to make sure I understood. So the USBE, despite the constitutional authority for public schools, would have less control over charter schools. And secondly, is there a fiscal note? Because now we're going to monitor where that monitoring responsibility was switched over to authorizers a few years ago. Now we're going to monitor. Would we have is there a fiscal note to give us more people to monitor or to do that monitoring?
No, not in this bill. There's not. And to your point, there were a number of years ago, I don't remember if it was 4 or 5
4 or
years
5.
ago, maybe 2019, we did ask for 3 FTE due to the increased number of charter schools to increase fiscal monitoring capacity. I do believe in our critical FTE funding request this year, we have 2 fiscal monitor. So in some ways, I think you'll see that a lot of our FTE requests are tied to the fact that we are monitoring more as more charter schools are approved. There's more LEAs to monitor. We were given 1 when we asked for 3 a number of years ago. So
That seems a little counterintuitive. And my last part of my question is if the charter office department did choose to move, would it not make that monitoring more expensive and more cumbersome? And especially if they used other services other than USBE services, it seems like it would not only be more expensive, but it would be more cumbersome for us to monitor, interface with systems that are not compatible with ours necessarily.
yes, to some extent, I would say almost the opposite, is that I would say that our collaboration and cooperation with the State Charter School Board and their staff is really good. And I would attribute a lot of that to the fact that we are very close and we kind of know each other as colleagues, and they are able to ask us questions and vice versa. So the more that they're away from USBE, you might lose some of that economies of scale, so to speak. But then the question I think you're asking is, would they then need to get more funding to support their own IT services, their own finance services? Probably.
But I'm more also worried about the monitoring cost for us if they're not, because I can't, given what we know about rental spaces and shortages in downtown Salt Lake, if they end up in, North San Pete or even farther, or even
Okay,
the- it would be,
we're getting off of
be more expensive.
yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you, Board Member Davis.
Yes, thank you. My concern is that with the monitoring piece and the money that's involved is, a lot of states have LEAI'd their state, charter boards, so to speak, or those who are authorizing charter schools. The disconnect with this code is that the entity that is approving expansions and new schools and such is not connected to the entity that's supposed to monitor the legalities in these schools. And so you can expand at whatever rate you want to without any money provided or communicating with those who are actually going to be responsible. To use 12-year-old terms, they get all the good stuff and we get all the bad stuff. I mean, that's the bottom line. They get the fun stuff and we get left with the mess. So I really think there's a disconnect with this bill, and there's got to be some difference to where growth is tied to FTE. As expansions happen, there's FTE that automatically is given to our office so we can do what they're asking us to do. If we have no say, it's like me spending my next door neighbor's budget without telling them, and they just have to come up with the money to do it. And me encumbering for whatever I want. It makes no sense at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We can move to the next one.
All right. The next one's you. Yep.
Right.
Okay.
The next one on our list is HB 29, Sensitive Material Review Amendments. So this is Representative Ivory's bill. If you were part of any of the focus groups throughout the last year, he introduced those a few times. Sorry, talk louder. But what this does is divides up the two different, sorry, my brain is so cloudy today, divides up the two different standards for materials that are in school. So there is now the subjective materials and there are objective materials, and provides two different, or clarifies the process for which those are determined at an LEA level. It also requires certain actions statewide if a certain amount of LEAs or charter schools find that there are objective materials, objective sensitive materials in their schools. It would then have them pulled throughout the entire state. And yeah, I think we've gone over this one before. So, but if there's any questions, happy to answer.
I believe there's a slight change to that where if it's pulled now, they have to go through. So I'm just reading on line 173. If the threshold described in subsection 7B, which is what you talked about, is met, each LEA statewide shall remove the material from student access unless the LEA governing board places the given instructional material on an LEA governing board agenda within 60 days after the day on which the LEA receives the notification. So in other words, it requires, instead of just an automatic poll, it requires them to poll unless they put it on their agenda.
Opt-in.
And then they have
situation.
to, they have to explain why they're retaining it, if that's the case. So there was an amendment made in Senate committee.
Thank you so much.
It is reflected in this, yes.
That's the first sub.
From what I'm reading, I clicked on the link. It's reflected in the current language that's there. So anyway, okay.
Okay.
Go ahead to the next one.
Thank you. The next one is also from Representative Ivory. It is HB 417 School Materials Amendment. So it is related to the bill we just discussed. This one deals a little bit more with the consequences of if there are sensitive materials in schools. So for one example, it prohibits LEA governing boards from prohibiting any of the public displays or reading of any of these materials at their meetings. It also provides a private right of action against LEAs if there are access to these sensitive materials. It also waives governmental immunity for a violation regarding the sensitive materials that are found, and amends the criminal code regarding pornographic or indecent materials on school property. So.
Okay, and that's still sitting in Rules Committee at the House, just so people know.
Yep.
Okay, if you want to go ahead.
All right.
Thank you.
The next bill is SB 173, Market Informed Compensation for Teachers. This bill impacts one existing stipend program and then creates a new bonus or compensation program. So the first part of SB 173 will change the TSSP or Teacher Salary Supplement Program to now be named the Salary Supplement for Highly Needed Educators. The two biggest changes, and maybe more, is that number one, currently the TSSP, of course, is managed at the USBE level, including appeals, determinations, et cetera. The new version of this program, which I believe I heard Senator Fillmore called SHINE, will allow the LEAs, the districts and charters, to designate somewhere between 2 and 5 high needs areas. So they will be able to look at their own workforce and determine which educator areas they are either having a hard time recruiting or retaining. And instead of that being done at the state level. It also, so they will have to make those determinations on the areas. It also gives the LEAs the authority to determine the bonus amounts or the different amounts of the stipend, where right now the state determines that. So that's the first big change. And should I go to the second one, or did you want to have a question?
There's a question, but we can, is it okay if we finish the discussion on this and then come to you, Member Bogus? Okay, finish the discussion, then we'll refer back to the full thing. Okay.
Okay, and it's SB 173. And then the second part of the bill creates a new program or compensation supplement called the Excellence in Education and Leadership Supplement. This program, it's a 5-year pilot. This is the one that's tied to the $200 million one-time funding that we've heard talked about in PEA. And the intent is to provide compensation to top tier performance level educators. There's different amounts of compensation based on so it's for the whole program's for the top 25% performing teachers, but there's a higher compensation level if you're in the top 5%, than if you're in the 6 to 10%, and then 11 to 25%. This program will be administered by the Utah State University Center for the School of the Future. And that School of the Future will be the one to determine the benchmarks or the criteria for how teachers are determined to be in the top 25%. Also, there is a portion or an amount that will be given and awarded to teachers who are teaching in high poverty schools. And so in some ways, we'll see that the effective teachers in high poverty schools, likely that program will go away, which we did see in the PEA recommendations that it's just one-time funding, meaning that would be rolled up into the add-on, and then they've allotted 1 more year funding under that program. So this program will not only touch on high performing teachers, but also those who are in high poverty schools. It's 3 years kind of ramp up, 2 years ramp up, 1 year for the School of the Future to prepare make the determinations. They do get 1% of the appropriation to administer the program. And then the second year will be for LEAs to prepare for submitting information and determining that their educators qualify. The Center for the Future will then let USBE know how much we should send to the LEAs, and beginning the fall of 26 is when you would see the first stipends or compensation going out.
Okay, we do have a question on that, but I was just wanting to clarify that we would have very little to do with the bottom part, right? They would be managing it, all of that, right? Okay. All right. Board Member Bogus, you had a Whoops, I turned you off on accident.
I think I'm on.
You are now. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Chair, through the chair, Superintendent Stallings, the scuttlebutt on this bill, if you will, among my teacher cohorts is not good. They're not really responding in a way that I think people might think they are. They've characterized it in a way that indicates that it's going to build dissension among the ranks in a place where we're trying to build unity. They've characterized it as possibly unattainable, creating a kind of a classist system among our educators. I hope I'm articulating this well. I'm wondering, and maybe it's inappropriate to ask, but I'm wondering, ma'am, if you could respond to those concerns.
Well, I didn't not ask for the bill personally. So it is difficult because we know that, and I don't know, I'm kind of looking towards Superintendent Dixon because she's got a lot of experience in performance-based compensation programs. And I've listened to her as she's been speaking with legislators as they ask and or they are sharing the ways they'd like to look at more performance-based funding, so to speak, for educators. There are difficulties, especially, for example, when you have an educator who maybe is in a non-tested subject, right? Because we do have assessment results and student performance results for certain subjects but other subjects we don't. Like there's not a standardized test for art or singing teachers, for example, right?
There's not.
So that's going to be something that the School for the Center of the Future is going to have to grapple with. I will say that something that we learned is this program is patterned after a similar program that is in Texas. I don't know that it's a statewide program, and I don't know currently if it's like all district. It's a small group, right? It's Houston. Thank you. So they've done it on a little bit smaller scale, although they're small scale. It is Texas. They may have a lot of students in the Houston school district, but they're not doing it statewide. It's hard for me to speak on behalf of Senator Fillmore. But I know that his intent is that he would like to reward teachers and keep some of those high performing teachers in the system where he's hearing a lot of them maybe leaving. And I've heard him say, this is where it's awkward because I'm just repeating some of the things I've heard him say, is that he would like to see top performing teachers make over 100,000 and that they will stay longer.
May I follow up?
Yes, one more question.
So I hear about the center, and my question would be, could it be argued? And I think it could be, but I'm going to ask you, could it be argued that we are now codifying the cessation of our constitutional authority to a third party and making it dynamic without accountability to our voters and the people who represent them?
It could be argued that, yes, I think someone could make that argument.
I don't like this bill. I don't know how the body feels. I think if we would like to reward teachers for extraordinary work, there are far better ways of engaging in that. I would leave it to the body to comment. Thank you, ma'am, for your time. I know that those were not questions that were comfortable. Thank you.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes left in this area roughly. Oh, my apologies. Yes, go ahead, Board Member Lair.
I had a few questions also. So it sounds like, as Member Bogus has pointed out, that the USBE is largely out of this process, except I can't understand how USU will get, the School for the Future will get student data that we guard so carefully. How will they get student data without using the student data that the USBE has, especially the historical data?
Yeah, that is not addressed in the bill right now. I wondered the same thing, whether they wanted to provide some required data sharing between USBE and Utah State, or whether Utah State was going to set up their own separate reporting system. That is not addressed here. And my guess is because Utah State will have a full year and $1 million to run the program, which I'm like, I'm very jealous of that ramp up time. Let's just say that. I wish we had that for all new programs. But during that year, they will likely find out there are things that they'll need potentially from USBE. And Senator Fillmore, I have heard him say that some of the more detailed technical aspects of maybe data sharing or how they will report to USBE, which educators have been determined eligible, which LEAs they're in, that could come up in a bill next year is my guess.
Concerned that we protect our data like we always have been very concerned. And that parents know that data is going to USU if that's ends up what is happening. I'm secondly concerned that there is that we know we've had research for years that say that student achievement is determined by student zip code. And I'm troubled that we would be rewarding teachers when we know that students achieve better in certain areas of the state than others. And I just hope that if we end up collaborating with USU, we get some of that $1 million and that we drive a hard bargain with USU. If you want us to help you, this is how much it'll cost you. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead to the next one.
Okay. The next one is HB 420, School Code of Conduct Protections by Representative McPherson. The original version of this bill would have required USBE to potentially review some retaliation claims. I just wanted to start out with this. The first sub and the amendment do take USBE out of that space. So I think we're grateful for that. So first, what this bill does is it establishes an LEA code of conduct. Much of what is in this bill is actually in one of our board rules. We do have a board rule that does require LEAs to have a code of conduct. It does also provide for requirements about a review of retaliation claims, but those reviews are limited to the local school board as opposed to it. The former language was broad enough that there was a question about whether somebody who has a claim of retaliation could seek review at the state board. And I think that language is clear now. So that's it. It requires a LEA code of conduct. LEAs are already required to have one. And happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Is there, okay, there's Board Member Davis has a question. Is
I'm
that
just
you?
in line for a motion.
Oh, okay. All right, Board Member Real.
Has it gone to committee yet, or were those questions? And what were the responses in committee when they brought that up, if that was brought up, that a lot of these already exist and we didn't need a new law?
Trying to remember if somebody addressed that specific. I think that Representative McPherson was feeling like they'd like it in code is my understanding, as opposed to being in board rule.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. And I think we're ready for the next section of our meeting. Are there any others you feel like we probably need to address real quick? Or are you good to move on?
Good.
Okay.
Whatever
All
you'd
right.
like.
I'm just telling you the lineup we have. We have motions from last week. We had divided a motion, and so we had two parts left of that. I have Board Member Davis next, and then Board Member Bogus after that, just letting the group know where we're sitting at time-wise. So if we can pull up the motions from last week, the first motion failed, and it was, well, anyways, we can go down to the next motion. The next motion that was on the board was that the board opposed Senate Bill 173, market informed compensation for teachers. And I believe that was the bill we were just talking about, right? Okay, so well, do I need to have someone? If someone wants to remake that motion, just so we've got it fresh today, we'll start there. Do you want to remake it, Board Member Straight?
Yes, and I'd like to change it a little bit.
Okay,
So if we put it on the board, oh, there it is. No,
Oh, we should probably take and seconded by.
I guess I can start while.
yeah,
we're
give us
looking that up.
give us the motion there.
So I move that USBE request the legislature to fund USBE funding priorities prior to funding Utah Fits All, House Bill 529, and market-informed compensation for teachers, Senate Bill 173.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion to that? Go ahead, you get to speak first.
Yes, thank you. So I thought this wording states it in a more palpable way, because as I stated last time, we worked hard on our priorities. We are the educational entity of the state, and I don't want to come out in opposition necessarily to 529 or Senate Bill 173, but instead come from the standpoint of supporting our priorities, what we see as important. These could be very important, but I think we need to stand by what we have in our priorities first and foremost. Thank you.
Okay, I believe I have Board Member Bogus next and then Board Member Davis, just so, are you speaking to this? Are you up for a motion?
I'm up for motion.
Oh, okay, my apologies. Board Member Davis, are you speaking to this? Okay, all right. Is there anyone that is speaking to this that would like to weigh in? Board Member Lair, is that?
I support this motion. I like the positive nature of it, and I like the support of our priorities, which we spent considerable time on.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments? Our Chair, are you speaking to it?
Yeah, I support it. I think effectively this is what we do and we prioritize. And so I think it's helpful to reemphasize that we spent a lot of time, and some of us may or may not support other items that are being proposed, but this is what USBE came up with. So I'm in favor.
Okay, I'm just checking. Any online? Are we good? Okay, we are good to move forward for the vote. So the motion before the board is that USBE request the legislature to fund USBE funding priorities prior to funding Utah Fits All, House Bill 529, or market-informed compensation for teachers, Senate Bill 173. That's the motion before the board, and I will start at the top. Board Member Bogus? Yes, do you want to turn mics on? Board Member Bogus?
Yes.
Board Member Booth? Board Member Klein? Board Member Davis?
Yes.
Vice Chair Earls, a yes. Board Member Green?
Yes.
Board Member Hart? Board Member Hymas?
Yes.
Board Member Carey?
No.
Board Member Lair?
Yes.
Board Member Norton? Board Member Rill?
Yes.
Board Member Straight?
Yes.
Board Member Wood?
Yes.
Board Member, Chair Moss?
Yes.
The vote is 13 to 1. The no vote is Board Member Carey, and Board Member Klein is not here. So point of information? Are you asking someone?
I'm asking you,
Okay.
in the motion, it's listed as market informed compensation for teachers, but in the one we just looked at, it was called a different thing, like
Well, let's get the right name on
excellent
it.
something, I don't know.
Let's make sure we have the right name.
Oh, may I ask, then was the motion for the full bill or just?
It was for the $200 million one, I think.
Portion, okay.
Yeah, so what is that? Because here it's called, market informed compensation for teachers, but in the other one, I thought it was called excellence of something.
Yeah, so the bill title is SB 173, Market Informed Compensation for Teachers, but there's two programs in there. If you would like, we can narrow it to the programs itself. The second one is called Excellence in Education and Leadership.
I just think it needs to be
Supplement.
the whole thing. Thank you.
Okay.
So that's fine, I guess, the way
Okay.
we did it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and then we had a second motion from last week, or did that incorporate both those into it? The other, oh no, that incorporated both in, right? Am I, okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right, Board Member Davis, we have you up next. You had a motion
Yes,
for
thank
it
you.
for us? Glasses on.
Request.
Good. I move that the USB asks the legislature for a fiscal note for 3 FTE for monitoring responsibilities in HB 301 Charter School Accountability Amendment, and that an incremental increase formula is included for charter expansions. I'll speak briefly.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, Board Member Lair seconds. Go ahead and speak.
I just want to go back to, it feels like, when our body's not the one that's responsible really for a lot of the work and the goals and the expansions, and then we're responsible to do the monitoring, we need to have some kind of incremental tie where our monitoring FTEs increase with school increases. There's like 178 schools out there. Well, LEAs, 40 of those are districts. But if they continue to increase, how are we going to monitor?
Okay. Anyone else speaking to this motion? Chairman Moss?
I don't like. Just question for the maker of the motion. And we discussed this a little bit when we were asking questions, but I can't say I tracked the three. My understanding of the bill is that USBE would maintain the oversight it already does. And it would clarify that the charter board is not so much monitoring the same things we are, but focused on the charter fidelity to their charter. So could you just pinpoint where the 3 additional FTEs come in, or is it just growth? Is it the bill itself, or is this just saying as the natural kind of product of charter growth, we need more? Is there something in the bill that ramps it up by 3?
I think it goes to the age-old question. We've had this constant MOU question, for years, and we haven't been able to get to the point because, it's like, who's responsible for what things? And especially if this bill goes and we have less and less of a connection with our state charter board, we have fewer folks that we're recommending to be on the board, and they potentially are going to move out, and we're not going to have these working relationships. I mean, I love our state charter board currently. I'll be honest. I contact them about if constituents call with concerns from charters, et cetera, and we kind of work together to work it out. And I feel this more and more separation. We're going to be hanging out there doing the monitoring, and they're going to be expanding, and it's really going to fall so hard in our laps instead of this sort of shared responsibility that we've been doing so far.
Quick follow-up.
Yes, go ahead.
I share the concern. I think the MOU needs to be done. I think there's movement in that direction, but I don't see under the current.
MOU.
Well, I think they're still seeking an MOU, my understanding. I guess my point is that I think that's something in progress. And I'm not sure this is actually meant to increase our oversight as would justify 3 FTEs. And that might come more clear if there's an MOU. So I don't see this bill needing to have a fiscal. That's my position. I think it's meant to maintain what we're doing and give them a more clear view that might be more limited in their academic oversight and monitoring, knowing that we monitor turnaround, the 2 versions as currently existed. So I'm not sure this without the MOU necessitates 3 more FTEs.
May I follow up?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I mean, we can reduce the FTEs and just put in the incremental increase with growth, but what do we have right now? What FTEs do we have that are specific to monitoring charter schools? How many of those do we have? Chair, may I ask staff?
Yes, is there someone who has the answer to that, or maybe could get that for Board Member Davis?
I believe we only have 1 FTE that's specific to charter school oversight of charter school authorizers. Otherwise, the monitoring that happens in our office is for all LEAs, meaning, the school fees monitors,
Financial,
yeah,
right,
or SPED, or
I mean, I think we need to increase that by 2, because looking at this bill, you're not even going to need an MOU after that. It basically outlines who does what, and we get the bulk of the hard work.
Okay, Board Member Straight, you had a comment? Oh, you didn't? Okay, Board Member Lair?
And I support this motion. I alluded to it earlier. But with all respect to the chair who's done a lot of work with charter schools, an MOU doesn't give us any money. And we need money to monitor, and that because that costs money. And there are now 4 times as many charter schools as there are school districts. So that definitely is a lot of work on the part of the USBE, and it's really no easier. Well, I can't say that categorically, but it's it's almost equally as hard to monitor a smaller LEA as a larger LEA. Same kind of factors have to be processed. So we won't naturally get any money through an MOU. So I think we need to strike while the iron's hot. I secondly have to say, this is a philosophical flip-flop. A few years ago, there was a definite effort by charter school advocates to want the authorizers to clean their own house and keep these schools in line and keep them doing the things that traditional schools and all schools, public schools, should do. And I feel like now that they found out how hard it was, and now they're wanting to pass that responsibility back to the USBE. And I think that I've made peace with the fact that it should lie with the authorizers. So I think this is also sort of a change of philosophy without any money.
Just point of information, the 3 would be inclusive of the one we already have. So it would be 2 additional.
Okay, we'd probably need an amendment for that, or unless anyone has any objections from changing that to 2 to 3. Are there any objections for that?
I think that you would just, when they work with the bill sponsor, they would just know that there are 3 total.
This says for 2 additional, so we probably need to change it to 2
Okay.
from 3.
Okay.
Okay, no objections. I'm ruling that as unanimous. Okay. And all right, Chair Moss?
Somebody else up first? I just had a clarification to Member Lear's comment, but I can wait for whoever.
I don't think so. Is this real up or is that not? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Just quick point of clarification. I don't understand this bill to give us more responsibility. The MOU that's been discussed may or may not give us more. It will not give us money. I guess my point was just that assuming we get to an MOU, that might clarify whether we in fact have a need for more FTEs. That was my point. I just don't think the bill imposes new responsibilities that necessitate. I feel like Chair Huntsman when he went into specificity. Necessitates additional FTEs, but that might be more clear when we have an MOU. That was my point.
Don't need an MOU.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think I see any additional questions or comments to this. And so we're going to go ahead and take a vote. The motion before the board is that the board ask the legislature for a fiscal note for 2 full-time employees for monitoring responsibilities in House Bill 301, charter school accountability amendments, and that an incremental increase formula is included for charter expansions. And we'll start at the bottom. Chair Moss.
No.
Chair Wood, Board Member Wood.
Yes.
Board Member Straight.
Yeah.
Board Member Rill.
Yes.
Might want to turn those on. Board Member Norton. Board Member Lear.
Yes.
Board Member Carey.
No.
Board Member Hymas.
No.
Board Member Hart.
No.
Board Member Green.
No.
Board Member Vice Chair Earl is no. Board Member Davis.
Yes.
Board Member Klein. Board Member Booth. And Board Member Bogus.
No.
Okay, the yeses are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeses. That does not pass. The yeses were Wood, Straight, Rill, Norton, Lear, Davis, and Booth. And then Board Member Bogus, I have you up next for a motion. Or did we already take care of that?
No.
Okay,
I would move that the board oppose in its official capacity SB 173.
okay, so the motion before the board is that the board oppose Senate Bill 173. Do you have a second?
We'll second that.
Vice Chair Davis is a second. And let's go ahead and speak to that, and then we'll take any additional questions.
So I'm happy to entertain debate. I think I've already kind of spoken to it in my questions. I just really feel like this bill has not been thoroughly vetted in the capacity of entertaining that dialogue of what the front lines look like on the ground. And I have not just great consternation, I have explicit opposition to ceding our authority to third parties. And so I would leave it at that and I can wrap later.
Okay, and it looks like we have comments from Board Member Davis.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just concerned ultimately that this is going to hurt kids. And when you start tying compensation to test scores and such, it becomes really difficult. And I remember as a teacher, I was Statue of Liberty, and any child that had a trouble, was slow, had behaviors, anything, bring him in. The counselors would look at me with puppy dog eyes from the door, and I'd be like, bring me another desk. But then at one point, someone mentioned that they were going to start publishing test scores of teachers. And I said to the counselors, I'm really sorry, but I have to say no, because my whole professional reputation is going to be on the line here. And people are going to think I'm not a good teacher because I'm taking every struggling student that's walking in our doors. And this just smacks of all of that to me. And, you know, we want Statue of Liberty teachers. We want people to say, bring me anybody and I will help them. I will help them learn. And this just goes the opposite direction. So I'm opposed to this.
Thank you. That answered my question. I didn't know what a Statue of Liberty teacher was. So that's the first time I've heard that, but bring me your, yep, got it. Got it. I visualized it as you were going through it. All of a sudden I had this warm feeling inside. So yes, thank you. And then we have a comment from Board Member Wood. Well, I think Board Member Wood was there. Do you have a comment? Okay, she's down lower.
Thank you. I wanted to speak for this motion also. I actually, my daughter's mother-in-law came to me and she said, do you know about this bill? And I did not know about the bill at the time. And she said, our teachers are so concerned. She said, right now we have PLCs, we work together. If somebody has a best practice, they share that best practice. And she said, I feel like this will just start to divide us instead of bring us together in what's best for all kids.
Thank you. I believe we're going to go Norton. You're on, right? Norton, we're kind of going to go up this way. We'll work this way up. So go ahead.
I would agree with that. For years and years and years, they have been our administrators, our state, the education across the country has been talking to us about working together. And it's taken a long time, but I think we are working together in seeing that all of these students are all of our responsibility. And yes, this does, I think, put a giant block in that mentality. And it's interesting because across the nation, our corporations are jumping into the space of doing things together. They are rewarding units and they are rewarding divisions for achieving growth or goals. And it's not individuals that they're doing. They are doing it on this group basis. And now we're walking away from that. The other thing that brings me a great concern is what is this going to do in our profession to administrators, to principals, because who would want to be in that position? I think that is a dangerous, scary position to now be the one that is pointing out that you are better than you. And I, you know, the way that an administrator has to go through and evaluate, I think people that they already are kind of looking at their job and saying, why did I ever leave the classroom? Now they really will be saying that.
Okay, Board Member Straight.
You know, increasing teacher efficacy is professionalism. And when teachers are empowered, they're highly effective. And what's more effective than empowered teachers is a group of empowered teachers. So collaborative teacher efficacy is working together for the benefit of your students. In elementary, they call the second grade group of teachers, they call them a team. So are they a team or not? And I say they're a team. We know the reaction, at least that I get when I go into schools and we talk about the professional hours that have been granted. That was amazing. That increased the professionalism of our teachers. And We need to continue that. That's where we need to put the funding. Increasing professionalism by treating teachers as professionals. Thank you.
Okay, next person, I have Board Member Lair.
And I have grave concern about something a little bit different, and that is having spent 5 years plus on the Student Data Privacy Committee, where legislators, board members, local members weighed in on their concerns about student data privacy, that suddenly this information will not be protected by our office as we've been charged with all the protections that we've paid for and built into that system, that somehow this will be something that is transferred to another program. And I have serious concerns about that being done carefully and safely with full information to all parents.
Okay, and let's see. Okay, Board Member Hart.
So I the questions. Isn't this a pilot?
Mhm.
Is it how do people get in this pilot?
So, well, a lot of the details will be determined by the Center for School of the Future at Utah State. An LEA may choose to be in the program. So LEAs could say, we are not going to participate.
Okay.
Is that your question?
And how long is so if they participate, are they participating for the 5 years? Or is the pilot available for 5 years?
Right now, the pilot is for 5 years, 2 years of ramp up time, 1 year for School of the Future, 1 year for LEAs.
Oh, that's right.
With
Okay.
3 years of the compensation. So I believe that the 200 million minus the amount for administration would be chunked out into 3 years to pay for the compensation. So
And
it's at
is-
66-ish million or 65, 60 something million a year.
So is there something in the bill that doesn't allow teachers to work together to all achieve the thresholds?
It's a good question. Right now, it talks about eligible teachers. I don't know that, I mean, that's an interesting concept of whether the Center for the School of Future, if they, using this existing language, could compensate a team or everybody on a team. I'd have to look, I'd have to read it.
Is there any reason that an LEA or a charter school would be required to participate in this?
It says right now, it says an LEA may participate.
Okay, I have two statements. One is, at some point, we have to look at innovative options that might move our cheese. We have to give LEAs opportunities to look at old problems in new ways. A pilot program does exactly that. In addition, the lens of cooperation versus competition is determined by, in this case, the educator. You can see it as competition, or you can see it as collaborating to meet a goal. I understand, I've been a principal for a long time, and I understand how it would change my responsibilities. However, I'm not afraid of those changes. If I thought that the way this program is set up is something that my students would benefit from. So I'm not saying, yeah, jump in, but I'm also saying that at some point, we have to look at different ways to solve problems. Secondly, I should have made this comment probably a couple of meetings ago. I just don't philosophically believe that we should, and I know there's arguments for and against this, but I don't necessarily believe that we should be doing as much. I don't think it's helpful to be changing or adjusting or commenting on things that we don't know all of the ins and outs. Now, and I understand that there's problems with that logic, but I wanted to explain my vote, which is often a no. In fact, somebody said I must have been grumpy last week because I voted no on everything. I just don't think that we are in the arena, but there are other people trying to get some things accomplished. And so I don't see this bill as a threat. I see it as an opportunity, and that's my comment.
Okay, Chair Moss?
There we go. I'll just speak briefly. I support the bill, so I guess that means I oppose the motion. 2 points. I think we've made clear that our priorities come first. So I think I will oppose this motion and support the bill, knowing that we have asked for our priorities to be considered first, whatever money is there. I just want to speak in support of the idea. I actually really like it. And I'm not a teacher. And for once, maybe that actually is an advantage. I live in the law firm world where there is competition. Sometimes it's cutthroat. More often, it's partly collaborative and partly competitive. And I'll just say in the environment that I live, when somebody's really good at it, they tend to make more money. I'm a reasonably good attorney. I know others who make more money. I tend to go to them and work on collaboration on how we can help our clients and learn from each other. So I don't think competition is the death of collaboration. I live in a world where they actually coexist and they help everybody reach higher. So I like the concept. I don't know how much money is there, but I support it. I like the idea that we try some things. And I think truly all of my kids' teachers, I got 5 kids in the Wasatch District schools, as I think everybody knows, they're all wonderful. Some do it better than others. And I like the idea of rewarding that. And I think it actually generates learning from each other. So I would oppose the motion. Thanks.
All right, do we have any other lights?
Yeah, I do too.
Board Member Davis,
Yeah.
quickly, we're at the end of our time, but go
Just-
ahead.
Okay, so quickly, there's nothing prohibiting LEAs from doing this on their own right now. We have innovative sandbox. We have flexibility with 30% of the below the line funds, and they can contract with USU. My district is currently doing it. They are currently contracting with Dean Fossen and that team to do this very thing. So I just want to say, this is a $200 million pilot. $200 million. Thank you.
I just have this, if we have time for one more comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. I tend to agree with Member Hart in trying new things and letting the market sort itself out. This flies too close to the No Child Left Behind son for me, something that was ineffective and not great education policy. And for me, I think I love the idea of coming up with new ways to retain great teachers, but this one doesn't do it for me because it feels like there's a lot of apples and oranges that we're comparing in regards to how these educators are chosen and worked through. So I'm in opposition or of the bill and in favor of the motion.
Okay, do we have any other? I think we're at the end of
My
comments.
light is on, but I have nothing to say.
Okay. That's good to know. I'm just gonna weigh in real quick, and mine's probably different from everyone else's concern. I wonder if there's a grave concern. That's what people have used here, of some messaging. I wondered if there was a better way to do this. Maybe there's not, but I just worry about the messaging coming from this body to those making public decisions. So anyways, with that being said, let's go ahead with the vote. The message or the motion before the body is that the board oppose Senate Bill 173. And we will start at the top. Board Member Bogus. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, I think you're on.
Yes.
Okay, Board Member Booth,
Yes.
Board Member Klein, Board Member Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Earls, a no. Board Member Green,
Yes.
Board Member Hart,
No.
Board Member Hymus, Board Member Carey,
No.
Board Member Lair. Yes. Board Member Norton,
Yes.
Board Member Rill,
Yes.
Board Member Straight,
Yes.
Board Member Wood,
Yes.
Chair Moss?
No.
Okay, I think it passes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That passes with 8 in favor of the motion. The no votes were Vice Chair Earl, Vice Chair Hart, Board Member Hymas, Board Member Carey, and Board Member, our Chair Moss. And I will take one final motion. Okay, the motion before the
Second.
body is to adjourn. It's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.